Hi everyone, welcome to Value. So today we're looking at Meta Platforms and stock is at $100. It has dropped almost 23%. Valuation is about $270 billion. This stock at its peak was about $379. That was last year when valuations were at its peak. And now it's at 100, and we have not seen $100 in a long time for the stock. We literally have to go back to 2015 since we've seen these levels. So this company has done so much, made so much progress, and the value of this company is being valued as if it was back 7 years ago. So that kind of tells you there's potentially some values in the stock if you are looking into something that's more in the longer term, because if you believe in those fundamentals that, hey, they have Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and potentially they are possibly could make something of that virtual reality, though a lot of people have a lot of doubts and are spending a lot of money on trying to make it worthwhile, but we don't know if it's ever going to work out or not. But at the end of the day, we're looking at the present price and we're looking at the present numbers. So they just released their third quarter highlights, and if numbers are $27.7 billion for 2022, and last year it was $29 billion. So it's actually dropped by 4%, which is that's not great, because we're wanting a growth company. We're not wanting a company like this. Most people got into this company, or they like this company, is because they see it as something dominant, innovative, and something that could potentially just keep growing. The only thing that looks to be growing is the cost and expense. That's gone up by 19%. So that's the kind of thing about this year. We're seeing a lot of costs because of inflation, and the revenues are not catching up. So that's going to hurt the bottom line by a lot. So third quarter income from operations was $5.6 billion. That's down from $10.4 billion. That's down 46%. So you can already see that the numbers are not nice. The margins are not nice. Operating margin is 20% compared to last year's 36%. And of course, these numbers are dire, but the one thing these guys do have is they still hold the Facebook platform, they still hold Instagram, they still have WhatsApp, and they just have to change a few levers, and potentially the profit is back in again. So don't, in a sense, like, we're looking at Facebook and we go like, you're pretty dominant, so we give you the benefit of the doubt that potentially you can actually come back. So we're looking at these numbers, and potentially these horrible numbers are an opening for you to buy into a stock that potentially can easily just come back, because they held some very core products that people don't actually have much of an alternative when it comes to these products. So you're not going to start using something else instead of Facebook, because there's not really anything else that's that different. Well, in terms of, so you've got, no, people aren't really going into Snapchat, and they're not really going into all the other platforms. Like, I mean, they each have their own different use. Like, Snapchat tends to be popular for like teenagers or people that want privacy, whereas Facebook's that got that family feel. Instagram's more of like those images, and then you've got Twitter, which is kind of like a bit more like a bulletin board kind of situation, with Elon Musk taking over. Potentially that can be a game changer for Twitter, and it might affect Facebook. We never know. So that's the biggest question. So if we look at the net income was $4.3 billion. So these guys still generate billions and billions of dollars, even though it was down from $9 billion. That's more than a half, which is quite a bit. It's not a great look when you look at the financials for the present quarter, but I think they can change it around. But I think it looks like it's going to take a bit more time to change it around, and I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the stock price. But I think this kind of value is actually pretty good value if you're in here for the medium to long term. Like if you're in it for a short term, perhaps there's still going to be a bit more pressure on the stock price. We can't tell entirely, but if you're in it for the medium to long term, then it is pretty good value, because Facebook's one of those platforms that's pretty relevant. Like daily active users 2.93 billion. That's an increase of 4%. So you've got a platform that's quite popular. The only thing that's been hurt is its financials. It means the ad spend's not as high, or not as many companies are spending on ads. That as long as you have the customer base, you're still the most favorable platform that people are going to come to when it comes to advertising. So you've got Google, well, basically Alphabet, and you've got Meta. Those two companies are the ones that dominate the ad scene in terms of revenue, and basically they will continue to hold on to it. The one thing we will see with this kind of economy is the ad spend will reduce, hence why we're seeing these horrible, well, like in a sense, are horrible numbers, because they're not very high growth, or they're very negative. So, but they're massive numbers by any chance. So yeah, if we just if we jump into what the expectations are, they expect for the fourth quarter that the range will be $30 to $32 billion for fourth quarter. So that's much higher than the third quarter. Third quarter was only 27 billion. So expect the net profit to be a bit higher there as well. If we jump right to the financials, which is, I think, this is more comprehensive. So for the 9 months, they did $84 billion. And if you compare it to the prior year, it's very, very similar. So they've only had a really, really bad third quarter. So that's one thing to take note of. But a bad third quarter could just be signs of things to come. Like that next quarter could be even worse, or something like that. The one thing that probably is notable is the research and development costs has gone up by quite a bit, 9 billion compared to 6 billion. And we know why, because they're spending more on the VR. And we don't know if that's going to pay off. And it's the worry of a lot of people that, hey, your revenues are slowing down, your costs are increasing in general, and that's without the VR. And then now you're wanting to spend more investments into that VR kind of sector, and then now people kind of worry about the future of the company, because they're staking it all on one thing, whereas they're not really innovating in other areas. Literally they're happy with their three platforms, and they just want to get into VR. It's as simple as that. So I think there's potential, but it's kind of one of those things that looks like it's going to take quite a bit of time to really perfect and get going, and something that's going to be able to generate revenues in the shorter term. The one thing that I do see as a positive is these guys do have $41.78 billion in cash or equivalents. So that's a good amount of cash for them to go out and do something if they really, really wanted to. And then they do have long-term debt of $9.9 billion, but that cash position easily dwarfs that, so no worries on the debt because they have a lot of cash. It can leave some room for them to do an acquisition. Like, I think that's going to be a game changer if they did an acquisition. But I don't know if they will. So yeah, I think at the current time, $270 billion for a company that on a 9 months they were generating $18 billion. Of course, that's a lot lower than last year when it was $29 billion. And then add in the next quarter. Next quarter, maybe we expect $5 billion. So potentially they're at about $23 billion in net profit, which is still amazingly good. So for a company that's worth $270 billion, the numbers aren't too bad. But of course, they're not growing, so that's the worry. How do you value a company that's not growing and that's possibly moving backwards? I think the worry of it moving backwards is probably not that much, because they hold some core platforms they can continue to charge more on their ad spend. And once the economy improves, these guys will in that general sense will come back. So I think, at this pricing at $100, it's definitely worth looking at getting some of it. I think in the medium term to long term, it comes back quite strongly. I think they recognize the things aren't working, and are looking to make kind of come back from that. I think at the current pricing, it is cheap. Like, it's probably one of those things that I don't see any platforms really coming in to disrupt Facebook and their platforms. And it's kind of weird that they haven't tried to pivot into other things. Like, everything they've tried to pivot in was too out there. So like, they tried to go to crypto, but we saw those obvious problems. And then now they wanted to go into VR, and that's such a area that's undeveloped and needs so much more development that we don't actually know when it's going to be practical for them, especially in the revenue generation kind of area. I don't think personally that they're going to make much from that kind of area anytime soon, because they really got to create a whole ecosystem around that as well. So right now they're really, really reliant on Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, which, I mean, they're still very cool products, and they're still going to generate some good revenues. The biggest question is, what are they really going to do with the cash position? Like, they have been doing stock buybacks. I think one of the highlights was. So we've got share repurchases. We repurchased 6.5 billion of our Class A stock in the third quarter. So basically, and then they basically can buy another $17.8 billion that they're authorized to do. So I think, given the amount of cash they have, and given the amount that the stock's fallen, I can see that they're going to do a lot more buybacks. So I think that's also very positive, because it's one way to return cash back to shareholders as well. So I think overall it's a kind of a terrible third quarter, but I think they have enough core fundamentals in the company and enough cash that they can turn the stock price around, and we'll probably see it upwards in the medium term. So overall, it's very interesting to see a large company like this fall so much. It kind of just shows the situation we're really in. But at the same time, I think it's a slight overreaction on everyone's views that, hey, Facebook's Meta's kind of lost its touch. It's just only going for VR. It's not going for anything else. They have the cash. They can do buybacks and potentially do acquisitions. They're not in danger of really falling away, because they're such a core platform. I think people just feel like maybe there's not much going on, because they're so focused on the VR that they're not doing anything else, which they should. But hey, that's how it goes. Let me know if you've got any questions or anything. Until then, good luck investing, everyone.